The drive back from Vancouver International felt longer than the 6 months I'd spent in Fort McMurray. I'd been managing emergency logistics for a pipeline remediation project up north, the kind of contract that pays well precisely because it asks everything of you. No weekends, no signal half the time, just work, cold air, and the quiet satisfaction of solving problems that actually mattered. I pressed my forehead against the cab window and watched the familiar streets of Burnaby slide past. My street, my neighborhood, the maple in front of my house that I'd planted the spring. I turned 26, the year I signed the mortgage with shaking hands, and a certified check I'd saved for 4 years to put together. Then I saw the sign. Forge Sal, conditional, rents, max. Posted right in the middle of my front yard, staked into the ground like a flag claiming conquered territory. I told the driver to pull over. I sat there for a moment, not moving, just reading those 2 words over and over. The cab meter ticked. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I paid him, picked up my bag, and stepped out onto the sidewalk with the same measured calm I'd used every single time a pipeline ruptured in -30 weather, and someone needed to keep their head. Standing on my porch, in lawn chairs they had no business sitting in, were my mother and my older sister, Diane. My mother had a glass of white wine. Diane had her phone out, probably already calculating what she'd do with her share. Neither of them stood up when they saw me walking toward them. My mother just tilted her head, the way she does when she's already decided how a conversation is going to go. "You're earlier than we expected," she said. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at them. "I live here," I said. "When did I need to announce my arrival?" Diane put her phone down and crossed her arms. "About that. Before I tell you what was inside my jacket pocket, the document that was about to make that FOR sale sign completely irrelevant, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this goes. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a household where my mother managed the family's finances the way a casino manages a floor. Always the house advantage, always a quiet extraction happening somewhere you weren't looking. My father left when I was 12. After that, Diane became my mother's co-pilot in everything. The two of them moved through the world as a unit, and I was the outlier. The one who studied instead of calling home enough. The one who left for university and didn't come back to share an apartment. The one who, at 26, bought a house with her own money in a city they'd never shown much interest in until the property values started climbing. The house was a 1970s bungalow in South Burnaby. 3 bedrooms, original hardwood under the carpet, a backyard big enough to matter. I had stripped it to the studs in the 2nd bedroom and rebuilt it myself over 2 summers. I knew every wall stud by memory, every cork of the old boiler, every spot where the light came through at 4 in the afternoon and made the kitchen feel like something out of a magazine. It wasn't just an asset. It was the first proof I had ever held that I was going to be okay. I had known going into the Fort McMurray contract that 6 months was a long time to leave property unattended. I'm a logistics coordinator by profession. I think in contingencies. So before I flew out in February, I did what anyone with a functional understanding of risk should do. I spoke to a notary. I updated my will. And I made very specific, very limited legal arrangements, none of which included my mother or my sister. What I did not do was tell them that. Diane pulled her lawn chair forward and spoke in the voice she uses when she wants to sound reasonable. "Mom needed money, Claire. You knew that. Her building went condo and she had to move out by April. We tried to reach you. You sent 2 texts," I said. In March, I was on a remote site with no cell service for 3 weeks. "We couldn't wait," my mother said, with the quiet finality of someone who had already made peace with what they'd done. "The market was right. Your realtor, Marcus. Lovely man. He said if we listed in spring, we'd have multiple offers within a week." "My realtor," I repeated. "He came very highly recommended. Diane found him." I looked at my sister. "You hired a realtor to list my house." "We had the paperwork, Claire." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "You signed a general power of attorney before you left, remember? For your banking, in case there was an emergency." I remembered exactly what I had signed. And I remembered exactly what it did and did not cover. "There's a conditional offer in," my mother continued. "Young couple from Coquitlam. Very eager, they waived the inspection. Subjects come off on Friday. Once that happens, the sale closes in 30 days. She sipped her wine. We thought you'd understand. Family helps family. I noticed then that Diane was wearing a bracelet I had never seen before. Rose gold, the kind sold in the glass cases at the front of Holt Renfrew. My mother had a new coat folded over the arm of her chair. The tags were still attached. I asked one question. Is the buyer's agent inside? My mother's expression shifted slightly. Just slightly. She's doing a final walkthrough with the couple. Good, I said. I'd like to meet them. Claire. My mother's voice dropped. The warmth evaporated. Don't you dare embarrass this family. That sale is happening. We need it to happen. Diane's already used the deposit against the condo fees. You used the deposit, I said. It wasn't a question. Diane stood up. You were gone. You left us here with no support, no plan, and a property that was just sitting there while Mom was getting evicted. What were we supposed to do? I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about the 2 summers I'd spent with a nail gun and a belt sander and a YouTube tutorial playing on a loop. I thought about every overtime shift and every deferred vacation and every small sacrifice I had quietly made so that I would have somewhere permanent to land. I thought about the specific way both of them had looked when I signed the mortgage. Not proud, not happy for me, just quietly recalculating. They had decided I was a resource, not a person, a balance sheet entry they could draw down when it was convenient. I unzipped the front pocket of my bag. Let me go introduce myself, I said calmly, and walked up the steps between them. The front door opened before I reached it. A woman in a blazer came out first, the buyer's agent, I guessed, from the lockbox key in her hand. Behind her came a young couple, maybe late 20s, the man with his hand on the woman's back, both of them looking at the house with the particular expression of people who have already started mentally placing their furniture. The agent clocked me immediately. Can I help you? I'm Claire, I said. I own this property. A brief pause, the kind that happens when 2 incompatible facts collide in real time. This is the seller's daughter, Diane said from behind me, her voice coated with damage control. She's been away. She's a little confused about the situation. I'm not confused, I said pleasantly. I looked at the buyers. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. That's not fair to you. I turned back to the agent. But before subjects come off on Friday, I think you'll want to see this. I reached inside my jacket. What I pulled out was a document I had printed, signed, notarized, and couriered to a sealed file with my notary in February, 4 days before my flight to Fort McMurray. It was a title transfer, specifically a transfer of the property from Claire Renaud as an individual to the Claire Renaud Family Trust, a revocable living trust established under British Columbia law with a corporate trustee from a small but reputable trust company in downtown Vancouver. A power of attorney, even a general one, grants authority over the individual. It does not extend to assets held by a trust because the individual no longer holds those assets. The trust does, and my mother was not a trustee. Diane was not a trustee. They had exactly 0 legal authority over anything inside that trust. This is the property title, I said, handing it to the agent. It hasn't been held in my personal name since February 14th. The general power of attorney my mother used to authorize this listing has no jurisdiction over trust-held assets. I kept my voice conversational, the way you explain a scheduling conflict, not a criminal matter, which means the listing was unauthorized. The conditional offer is unenforceable, and the deposit that's already been spent, I glanced back at my sister, was spent without legal authority to receive it. The agent's face went very still. She was good at her job. You could see her running the math, checking her liability exposure, calculating exactly how quickly she needed to get her managing broker on the phone. The young couple looked at each other. The woman whispered something. The man put his hand on her arm. The agent said quietly, I'll need to make a call. Of course, I said, take your time. I turned around. My mother was standing at the top of the porch steps. The wine glass was still in her hand, but she had forgotten she was holding it. She looked the way she had looked once when I was 9 years old, and she had tried to return a purchase without a receipt, and the customer service manager had quietly, firmly told her no. That specific look of a woman realizing that the world has not made an exception for her. You planned this, she said. I prepared, I said. There's a difference. You set us up. Her voice cracked. You let us go through all of this. You let us think. I was in Fort McMurray, I said. I couldn't have stopped anything from up there even if I'd wanted to, but I could make sure that whatever you did had no legal standing when I got home. I paused. Which is exactly what I did. Diane had gone quiet. She was looking at the bracelet on her wrist, the way you look at something that has just changed categories, from gift to evidence. The agent came back around from the side of the house. Her call had lasted 4 minutes. I had timed it. I've spoken with our managing broker, she said. We're going to need to retract the listing effective immediately. The sellers of record, or the individual presenting as such, did not have documented authority over this title. We're also going to need to address the deposit. She looked at Diane. The funds need to be returned to the buyers. I don't have it, Diane said flatly. I used it for the condo fees, the first month's rent, and the deposit on the new unit. The buyer's agent looked at her for a moment. Then you'll need to make arrangements to restore it. If you'd like, you can sort that out privately. But if it isn't resolved, the buyers have grounds to pursue it through the Civil Resolution Tribunal. She looked at the young couple. I'm so sorry. This was not what any of us anticipated. The couple left without looking back at my mother and sister. I didn't blame them. They had done nothing wrong except trust that a listing was legitimate. I had already decided that if it came to it, I would cover any legal costs they incurred. Not because I was responsible, but because they were innocent, and that mattered to me. The agent gave me her card and a quiet nod before she got into her car. What was left was the three of us on the porch. My mother set down her wine glass on the railing. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. Soft now. Careful. The voice she uses when she needs something. I was going to be on the street, Claire. Do you understand that? I had nowhere to go. Diane tried everything. I had nowhere. You had me, I said. You could have called. You could have asked. I would have helped find you transitional housing. I would have loaned money for a damage deposit. I would have called agencies. There were options. We needed it fast. You needed it easy, I said. And I meant it without cruelty. There's a difference between fast and easy, too. Diane stepped forward. You are unbelievable. You've always done this. Always made us feel like we're the problem, like we're selfish, when all we've ever done is try to hold this family together without any help from you. I had heard this before, the version of my life in which my independence was abandonment, in which my savings were selfishness, in which every boundary I set was a betrayal. I had spent years trying to argue against it. I had spent years apologizing for things that were not wrongs. I was done with that. I want you both off my property by 6 o'clock tonight, I said. I'm going to call a locksmith this afternoon. If there are any items inside that belong to either of you, now is the time to get them. You're kicking us out, my mother said. You listed my house for sale, I said. I'm just reclaiming it. I went inside. The house had been cleaned. Aggressively. The kind of cleaning that happens when someone is preparing a property for showings. My furniture was still there, but things had been moved. The shelves in the living room had been rearranged. The photo of me and my team from the Fort McMurray site that I kept on the kitchen windowsill was gone. I found it later in the recycling bin in the garage, still in its frame. I sat down at my kitchen table, and I opened my laptop. I had one email to send, to my notary confirming that I was back in the province and that the trust was to remain active. One email to a real estate lawyer I had consulted before my contract just to get her professional read on whether my mother and sister had crossed from a civil matter into a criminal one. And one very short email to the RE/MAX managing broker, which I kept factual and unemotional because those are the emails that get taken seriously. Then I sat for a while without doing anything. I won't tell you I felt triumphant. I didn't. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with being right about people you wanted to be wrong about. I had set up that trust in February not because I believed my mother would actually go through with something like this. I had set it up because a part of me, the part that had grown up watching her treat everything as a communal resource and everyone's labor as hers to direct, couldn't afford not to. And being correct about that wasn't a victory. It was a door closing on a version of the relationship I had quietly hoped still existed. My phone rang at 4 p.m. It was Diane. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 3 minutes long. I listened to it twice, not because I was wavering, but because I wanted to make sure I understood what she was actually saying. What she was saying underneath the blame and the tears and the specific way she always positions herself as the one holding everything together was that the condo deposit was due Thursday and that she didn't have it and that she needed me to fix it. I put my phone down and looked out the kitchen window at the maple in the front yard. It was early June and the leaves had gone full green, the kind of deep saturated color that only happens in that small window before summer bleaches everything out. I had planted that tree from a 2-foot sapling bought at a garden center on Kingsway for $12. I had staked it through 2 winters. I had watched it grow. I did not call Diane back. What I did do, after a long moment, was look up the Residential Tenancy Branch and the BC Housing Emergency Listing Service. I sent my mother 3 links with a short note. These are the actual options. If you want help navigating them, I will help. If you want to continue the conversation we had on the porch, I won't. I kept it to 4 sentences. I did not apologize for anything. She didn't respond that night. The locksmith came at 5:30. My mother and Diane had left by then. They had taken the patio chairs, which weren't theirs, and left the wine glass on the railing, which I emptied and washed and put back in the cabinet. I reset the alarm code, changed the front and back door locks, checked every window latch the way I had learned to do in a trailer camp surrounded by nothing but boreal forest and shifting ice. 1 clean beep from the alarm panel when I set it. The house was quiet. The floors I had sanded held me up the same way they always had. I wasn't okay yet. I wasn't sure when I would be. But there's a specific kind of stability that comes not from never being hurt, but from knowing, in a verified and legally documented way, that you built something on solid ground and no one can take it from under you while you're not looking. That's what I had. I made tea. I sat in my kitchen. The afternoon light came through at exactly the angle I remembered, and I let it. If you've ever had to build something quietly and carefully precisely because you knew someone was watching and waiting for a chance, you'll know exactly what that moment felt like. There's something I've been thinking about since that afternoon in my kitchen, watching the light come through the window the way it always has. People talk about justice like it's something that arrives from the outside, handed down, delivered, imposed. But what happened on my porch that day wasn't justice arriving. It was consequence catching up. And there's a real difference between those 2 things. My mother and my sister made a choice. They didn't make it in desperation. Not really. They made it because they had spent years learning that I would absorb the cost, that I would quietly adjust, quietly forgive, quietly rebuild whatever they had taken apart. They mistook my patience for passivity and my independence for indifference. That mistake cost them, not because I punished them, because actions accumulate. Every decision lands somewhere, eventually on solid ground. What I did, setting up that trust, consulting a notary, thinking 4 steps ahead before I flew north, wasn't clever in some exceptional way. It was just the natural result of paying attention over a long period of time, of watching patterns, of taking seriously what I knew to be true about the people around me, even when I didn't want it to be true. That's not bitterness. That's a kind of earned wisdom that only comes from being honest about what you see, even when seeing it hurts. I think about Claire a lot, about the version of her that existed before Fort McMurray, before the trust document, before all of it, the one who still called home on Sundays hoping the dynamic had shifted, who sent money without being asked, who told herself that one more gesture of goodwill might finally tip the balance towards something mutual. That version of me was not weak. She was hopeful. But hope without clear eyes is just a way of outsourcing your safety to people who haven't earned it. The real work isn't the legal paperwork, though that matters enormously, and I'd encourage anyone in a similar position to take it seriously. The real work is the internal shift, the moment when you stop trying to earn belonging from people who've already decided you're a resource and start building your life on ground that actually holds. That shift doesn't come easy. It comes from a long, quiet accumulation of evidence that you finally stop arguing with. What I want anyone watching this to take away isn't be suspicious of your family. It's something quieter than that. It's this: the life you build with your own hands, your own income, your own discipline, that belongs to you. Not in a selfish way, in a foundational way. Protecting it isn't betrayal. It's integrity. And the people who tell you that protecting yourself is a form of cruelty are usually the ones who benefit most from you remaining unprotected. My house is still standing. The maple in the front yard came through another winter, and I sleep without watching my back, which is the only thing I ever really wanted.